Stephen A., who has more power, the Cavs owner Dan Gilbert or LeBron?
Dan Gilbert. Everybody can sit up there and talk about LeBron James having all the power all he wants to. Last time I checked, LeBron James isn't cutting checks. He's cashing them. Don't get me wrong. He's responsible for the value of the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise. It would plummet, in the Lake Erie if he were to depart. We all know the profound impact he had on the local economy in Cleveland once he departed. But when you ask the question, who has more power with the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's the man who cuts the check. And the reason why it's more profound in terms of Dan Gilbert's power now more than ever before is because he doesn't owe anybody anything because he delivered the title. See, that's the key here. When you're chasing that elusive crown and you didn't deliver on the goods, everything could go south on you. But the fact that he did not do that, the fact that a championship now resides in Cleveland, and he has a history of cutting the check. I don't agree with every decision Dan Gilbert made. I certainly don't agree with him from a temperamental standpoint, the way he disrespected LeBron. I don't blame LeBron if he never forgives that man for that. I get all of that. But let's not act like Dan Gilbert is the modern-day version of what Donald Sterling was in the 80s when he paid the lowest amount possible and all he did was collect a profit while the Clippers stunk up the joint for over a decade. That's not Dan Gilbert. Dan Gilbert cuts the check, and he's willing to pay in most situations. So he does have somewhat of an argument in that regard, particularly as we're sitting here now arguing the Cleveland Cavaliers are in first place and the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and we're acting like Dan Gilbert has done nothing.
No, he's
I
done
don't know
nothing.
if I could accuse the man of that.
Dan Gilbert has done nothing but stink and get lucky in the draft because they kept drafting higher than even their records suggested they should. Eventually,
we're not talking about that. We're talking about right now.
Because of dumb luck, they stockpiled enough talent that LeBron was interested in coming back. I mean, that's what happened. Dan Gilbert has done nothing. Dan Gilbert doesn't even really sign the checks. And I'll tell you why, Stephen A. That suggests that he has a choice. Now, right now in the NBA, you have to spend 90% of your cap. You have to. If you don't, then the difference is funneled to the players anyway. That's the floor, 90% of the cap. And every single owner in the NBA, without exception, if they have LeBron James, will give them the biggest contract they can. Every single one. Kyrie Irving, same thing. And many teams would give Kevin Love the max, too, whether or not he deserves it. So that's not really a choice he's making. Because of the salary cap, almost every owner behaves the exact same way. You don't need Dan Gilbert to sign those checks. There'd be a line out the door if you wanted to sell it to the franchise that would sign those exact same checks. Dan Gilbert deserves precisely zero credit, none at all. He hasn't done a damn thing. Nothing. Deserves no credit for this. He has nothing to do with it. He is interchangeable with a million different owners and a million different would-be owners. On the other hand, LeBron James is different from everyone. He's different than everything else in sports. His presence alone has turned Cleveland into one of the centers of the sports universe. And it's not as though he sprinkled this pixie dust over the city of Cleveland, and when he leaves, it's going to take root and it's going to bloom into this renaissance in Cleveland. No, when LeBron James leaves, it is over in Cleveland, and Cleveland goes back to meaning nothing in the sports world, at least in the basketball sports world. We saw what Kyrie could do and Kevin Love could do on their own. Even as Kyrie improves, he ain't ever going to be LeBron James. So LeBron James is not only more important to the Cleveland Cavaliers, he has more power than Dan Gilbert with the Cleveland Cavaliers, which is why he wanted his coach replaced. He got it. He wants a backup point guard. Watch what's going to happen. When he says jump, Dan Gilbert can throw a tantrum. Ultimately, it's how high and when can I come down, or else he knows LeBron's out of there. He can't afford that.
Not only are you wrong, you're misinformed. Number one, the payroll is $128 million as we speak. Number two, LeBron James had a guy owning cruise lines in Mickey Arison in Miami. One of the reasons he left was because he didn't like what they were doing in terms of luxury tax issues. Every NBA aficionado has chronicled this. Every one of them have mentioned this. That had something to do with it. In other words, you don't have to pay as much as Dan Gilbert paid. Wait a minute now. He's locked in for this year. He ain't going nowhere this year. The point that I'm trying to make to you is, I'm answering your question. The point that I'm trying to make to you is, yes, it would be wise for him to pay the money, but he doesn't have to. And so when we sit up here and we say that an owner has to,
he does.
Throughout NBA history, we have seen owners that went right up to the line, would do absolutely no more than that, and would sabotage their franchise in the face of profit. LeBron returning to the Cavs. Dan Gilbert bought the Cavs. You're talking about $880 million. I mean, do you have any idea what they're worth now? Because of LeBron. In other words, he already has his money.
No,
he's
once
got
LeBron
his money.
leaves, the value plummets.
Wait a minute. But at the same time, even though you could say it plummeted, Baltimore buys the Clippers for $2 billion.
It's LA.
So the point that I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to help you here, bro. I'm trying to say to you that, of course, your value might plummet to some degree, but the value of being a part of the NBA brand has significant cachet. You're gaining profit from that alone. Casinos with Dan Gilbert, gaining profit with that alone. Plus, he's got his own money anyway. So when you take that into consideration, yes, it would be wise for him to do exactly what you say, but he doesn't have to. So the fact that he doesn't have to, but he still chooses to position you to compete for a championship, I can't sit up there and say he deserves no credit.
He deserves no credit.
I can't do that.
So in other words, here are his options. Do precisely as LeBron James tells you, which is what will happen, or be an abject moron. Those are his two options. Who's going to choose abject moron? If he does, he's a laughing stock.
Has Dan Gilbert been a moron? Has Dan Gilbert been a moron in the past?
Yes.
Thank you. So he does have a choice, doesn't he? He does have a choice.
Because
he's already shown what he will do.
He was a laughing stock who said, we're going to win a championship before LeBron James ever does, and basically had to get on his knees and kiss the ring to get LeBron to come back.
Excuse me. And LeBron came, didn't he?
Well, once Gilbert groveled.
So what I'm saying to you is this. He benefited from it. You can't take back the benefits. He's in a position as an owner to screw things up. And the fact is, he doesn't deserve all the credit in the world. But respect you of all people being a capitalist that you are. I can't believe suddenly you're fogged over the difference between somebody who cuts the check and somebody who cashes it. I respect the fact that the man, as the owner, gets to cut the check. And I respect the prowess that comes with it.
And I do
What's
not.
wrong with that?
I do not, because everyone would be cutting the exact same check.
That's not true. That's not true. If that was the case, LeBron would still be in Miami.
Okay, check this out.
You're wrong.
Check this out, Dan Gilbert.
You're wrong.
Sell the team and watch what the next owner does with LeBron. They'll cut him the same check.